my day-to-day role is with human rights issues affecting sex workers with the New Zealand Prostitutes Collective. Prostitution wasn't decriminalised until 2003. The law in New Zealand traditionally was based on the English law, which it was never illegal to exchange sex for money, and it was never illegal to purchase sex. What was illegal was soliciting. So that's saying to someone, if you give me money, I'll have sex for you. And this created, as you can imagine, a moral double standard where the majority of sex workers are women, so men who paid for sex were above the law, but women who were paid for it were criminalised.
Is there anything illegal?
Yes. Anything to do with a sex worker under 18 is illegal. So it's not illegal to be a sex worker under 18, but it's illegal to be the client of someone who's under 18. It's illegal to assist a person under 18 into prostitution. Obviously, involuntary sex work is illegal, so coercion, fraud, exploitation, those kind of things are all illegal. It's also illegal for migrant workers to be sex workers. So
You're mentioning brothels and brothel operators. Are there prostitutes on the street, and are they part of the collective if there are?
Yes, we do have a considerable street-based sex work community, especially in my hometown of Christchurch. And coming back to your question about the collective, with there being no requirement for membership, we absolutely represent them. So, yeah, part of our outreach services to go out in the evenings and support street-based sex workers, making sure they have condoms, making sure they know the law, making sure they know their options if they're assaulted or how to keep themselves safe, that kind of thing.
Who falls under the qualification to join the collective?
Good question. It's a question that has no fixed answer. So the definition of a sex worker legally is someone who has sex for money. So that excludes adult film stars, exotic dancers, sensual masseuses. However, we do advocate for people in those professions. I just finished yesterday assisting an exotic dancer to settle a dispute with the club owner she worked for. A lot of exotic dancers, masseuses, webcam girls don't want to have our assistance. They don't identify as sex workers because of the stigma thing. They sort of go, "Oh no, well we're not engaged in that, so we don't want your support."
Mm-hmm.
So it's currently a question that the international network of sex workers are considering whether or not membership should be extended to those people. Some say yes, some say no. There is, in New Zealand, if someone came to us from that industry, we would support them if they asked for our support. But our primary focus is people who have sex for money. Other services we offer, in addition to legal services, we have weekly clinics and in the two largest cities, Wellington and Auckland, they're twice a week, where there's a sexual health nurse and or doctor available and a counsellor, qualified counsellor, and those services are free. New Zealand, I think it was always going to be easier in New Zealand than other countries because we have a strong history of promoting workers' rights, women's rights, and equality before the law. For example, we were the first country to give women the vote. Women in New Zealand have been allowed to vote since 1893. Most countries, it was well into the 20th century.
Do you face opposition?
So a bit of a leader.
Oh, yeah.
Pardon?
Do you face opposition within New Zealand to this decriminalization today? I imagine there might be some conservative persons or groups or perhaps religious organizations that might be strongly opposed to this freedom, essentially. What's your experience?
Absolutely. So Christian fundamentalists, other fundamentalist religious groups, radical feminists, people who believe that sex work is a form of violence against women and that clients should be criminalised. What I've seen recently in Christchurch is strong opposition to street-based sex workers, residents who don't like the visibility of sex work and so they should all be in brothels, they shouldn't be out on the street. So yeah, there will always be, I think with an issue as controversial as this, there will always be naysayers. One question I constantly get asked and that is constantly raised, a very emotional question, is would you want your daughter doing this? In my experience, most people don't like thinking about their daughter having sex at all, whether it's in the context of sex work or a traditional marriage. The other response to that is, no, I wouldn't, but if she did, I'd want her to be safe doing it.
Yeah, that actually was the next question I was going to ask, which is what has been the reaction of your family and friends and people that you encounter on a personal level about the nature of your work on behalf of sex workers in New Zealand?
Most people most family members and friends think it's really cool and interesting. They say, oh, wow, that's fascinating. How'd you get into that? Oh, you must learn so much. Both my parents were quite reticent about it. I think I had to really explain to them the nature of what I did. And I think I had to convince my father I was much more used to the collective as a lawyer than I was as a sex worker to get his head around the fact that they weren't trying to lure me into it.
Yeah. Do you have members of your collective that have been essentially forced into prostitution, or is it your sense that men and women enter that profession voluntarily?
Vast majority of the time voluntarily. What I have seen some instances of is people doing it consensually or being, convinced it's a good idea when they're under 18. And it is consensual, but there is obviously that degree of vulnerability and it's against the law. But no, there have been no cases of sex trafficking in New Zealand. We have had some human trafficking prosecutions for other industries like horticulture, agriculture, hospitality.
So here's a crude question from an American. I'll just be blunt with it. Do you have pimps in New Zealand? What we refer to as a pimp?
Short answer, no. You do have, on the street, you have a minder. But I think the primary difference between a pimp and a minder is if you look at American movies.
The top hat.
Well, you see, when I look at American movies or hear stories about the sex industry in America, it sounds like the pimp controls the worker.
Yeah.
What you have with sex workers on the street and minders here, the power all lies with the workers. The worker will say, if you take this number plate down and wait for me to get back in half an hour's time, I'll give you $10.
I don't want to say an average sex worker, but does the typical sex worker in New Zealand make a decent living at this?
Totally varies. You've got two ends of a spectrum and everything in between. So what you might call the high-class hooker could easily make sort of $10,000 a week. If you have a vulnerable...
New Zealand dollars.
Yeah, about $2 American. Whereas a more vulnerable worker with substance abuse issues will be living job to job. There is much less criminal activity since decriminalization because the sex workers now have the support of the police. So what happened traditionally when it was illegal is you had gang members or other criminals saying, look, I'll look after you, I'll make sure you don't get raped, I'll make sure. But now a sex worker can just call the police if something like that happens.
So is the relationship with the police pretty positive, would you say?
It is now. It's so traditionally police were public enemy number one. There was mistrust and disdain. And then even after decriminalisation, there was still a little bit of stigma. For example, if a sex worker was a victim of sexual assault, there was an element of, well, what did you expect standing out there in the middle of the night wearing that? Now it's really positive. For example, we meet regularly with them. We consult each other on policies. We have particular officers that we have direct relationships with. And we hear reports of sex workers who report violence, and they have nothing but positive experiences. So it's changed for the better.
Are there laws similar to this in other countries?
No. Australia is a great case study because they have all three versions of policy approach. So New South Wales, which is where Sydney is, has full decriminalisation like us. That's where we got the idea from. They've had it since 1979. The more conservative states like Western Australia and the Northern Territories have criminalisation, which is what we used to have, where it's illegal. Prostitution itself isn't illegal, but associated activities are. And then Victoria and Queensland have legalisation, which is where it's not illegal, but it's so heavily regulated that a lot of the harms of criminalisation arise.
Are there any changes to the current law that you would like to see, or policy changes that you would like to see different or improved upon?
Two changes. First of all, I would like to see the section which bans temporary visa holders from working in sex work removed. I think sex work should be treated like other jobs, so if you can work in New Zealand, you can be a sex worker. The other change I would like to see is legislation which prohibits discrimination against sex workers. So currently sex workers, you can go into a bank and say, I'd like to borrow money. And they say, oh, how do you earn money? And you go, oh, I'm a sex worker. And they go, oh, no, we won't lend you money. I'd like to see something like that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Become illegal, just like it's illegal to discriminate on the grounds of sexuality, gender, marital status, other.
Well, Ms. Sweetman, thank you very much for your time. I certainly learned a lot about the Sex Workers Collective of New Zealand, and it's very interesting from my American perspective. As you know, the views run the gamut over here in the United States, from support to such a program, I imagine, to abject disagreement. So thank you for your time, and much appreciated.